I think I will sit here. Can you hear me clearly, everybody? Yes. Thank you, Sirken, co-organizers, for the invitation. I think what we are having today is a very, very important discussion. And this is actually the first bigger public discussion on this issue that I'm participating in. And when I say bigger, I mean on a Nordic level. And I think it's highly important that we do this now, even if it's really hard to see solutions and pathways forward as long as the war continues, of course. I come from UIT, the University of Tromso, which has a history of 30 years of close cooperation with Russian universities. So this is my background, and I have been part of this cooperation for the last 20 years myself. And now everything is turned upside down over the last, well, not only since February 24, but over the last 2 years, with the pandemic first cutting us off from our Russian colleagues, and also the gradual cutting off and isolationist policy from Russian authorities. So we are facing a very new situation, and I would like to say thank you to Oksana, if she's still with us, for a very interesting presentations, in particular the survey and the respondent answers, which makes us all really think, I guess. And as for the last question to Oksana's presentation, I think what can our universities do? I think what we are doing today is one part of the answer. We can do this. We can talk publicly about the situation, and we can keep a discussion going on the situation that will be heard also by our Russian colleagues. Even if they are not free to participate, they will listen in and they will know our points of view. And I think that's one important part of the solution. So I will organize my small talk around 3 points. I will say a bit first about the situation in Norway and how Norway is dealing with institutional and non-institutional cooperation in the academic sphere. And I will say a bit about the situation in Russia also, because I think that's really important to understand what our Russian colleagues are facing. And then I will try to say a bit about Russian studies as a research field. And the sad fact is that for now, we are more or less stuck with digital Russia studies. And this will potentially have long-term consequences, of course. Our limited access to the research field is a big thing. So as for Norway first, just like Finland and most other European states, Norway quickly after February 24 introduced sanctions against Russia in the academic sector, by way of a freeze in collaboration on an institutional level. And I think it was important for the Norwegian authorities to emphasize that this is a freeze. It's not a total boycott for now. And I would say that this freeze in institutional cooperation is first and foremost a very important political and moral statement that the Norwegian academic community condemns the invasion of Ukraine and the actions of the Kremlin. But as for the practical side of this freeze in cooperation, I mean, we cannot work together as we used to anyway, due to the more general sanctions. We cannot travel to meet in Russia. We can perhaps invite Russian colleagues in the months to come, but that's also really difficult. So the freeze in institutional cooperation is a political statement, important, but not, doesn't change anything on the practical level. In Norway, we had an immediate debate on extending the freeze into a full boycott, not only of the academic sector, the research sector, but also on the cultural sector. And there was a debate in the media on whether individual artists, individual cultural workers should not also be subject to a broader boycott. But, and as will be my main point when talking on Russia, a full boycott policy risks contributing to or will help fulfill the Kremlin's policy of isolation, which I think is very dangerous. We see how new legislation in Russia over the last 2 years in particular is isolating the Russian academic society, closing people off from international contact and collaboration. And this is, of course, just part of the broader authoritarian and anti-Western policy from the Russian government. So whatever we can do to still collaborate, I think is very important. Unfortunately, we are in Norway strongly encouraged to maintain collaboration on the researcher-to-researcher level, to keep in contact with our Russian colleagues and try to maintain some kind of cooperation. And this is the right way forward, I think. The Norwegian research community on Russia made immediate efforts in the media to establish a clear consensus that there is no such thing as collective guilt for Russians. We cannot automatically hold single Russian citizens responsible for the Kremlin's war on Ukraine. We should condemn any pro-war statement coming from the Russian side, of course, also from individuals, but we cannot start from the fact that all Russians support the war. So in Norway, we are in, well, the same situation as in Finland, I guess. On the one hand, freezing cooperation on institutional level. On the other hand, opening up for keeping in contact and continuing collaboration on individual level. And we find ourselves in a paradoxical situation. A very difficult gray zone appears. We are supposed to collaborate, but we cannot offer much support. We can perhaps not offer any support or security for Russian colleagues, even if it's exactly our collaboration that puts them at risk. We are no longer in a position to provide any professional assistance, not in the form of institutional frameworks, of course, not in the form of research funding. So in practice, we are asking our Russian colleagues to work with us on a private basis. And from my experience, my Russian colleagues in history and in political science and in anthropology, they want to collaborate. They want to keep a level of normality in their professional lives. They want to keep a dialogue. They want to keep some professional activity going with us. But they do this now, of course, at potentially great costs. And the expansion of the law on foreign agents, which is now currently being discussed by the Duma, implies that not only will foreign funding put you on the list as an agent, but just being under foreign influence, just keeping in touch, just communicating can be sufficient to put you on the list. So the stakes are getting higher. And the Russian colleagues that I'm in touch with, they say that they would very much like to await the situation until after the Duma has discussed this new law, because it will be potentially putting a new agenda in front of us. So a bit more on Russia and the crackdown on academic freedom, which has been happening, as Sirke said, over years, but has been intensified after the 24th of February. I have Russian colleagues now, and I've read media reports saying that what we see now is actually the end of social sciences in Russia. Others point out that we are watching an intellectual catastrophe developing. If the research sector in Russia ends up with only people who choose to stay silent, choose to not ask critical questions, then we have an intellectual catastrophe. And this is potentially what we are seeing. Academic freedom implies, among other things, the liberty to choose freely which perspectives to emphasize, what research questions to ask, and it also implies the liberty to disseminate research results freely. And as we all know, of course, these rights have come under increasing pressure over the last years, in the same way as the freedom of expression and civil rights in Russia in general. And as we see, Russian authorities are using all measures at their hands. They're using both the stick and the carrot. The stick in the way of judicial amendments, restrictions, new legislation. The carrot in the form of information campaigns, propaganda to control the public space and control public debate. So it's a very massive effort from Russian authorities. And we probably also all remember the amendments in the Russian law on education last summer from June, which actually banned non-state approved educational activities and cooperation with foreign academics. So the law now requires universities to obtain formal state permission for public outreach outside formal settings, and also state permission for foreign partnership deals. And of course, now this is all put on hold due to the war and the Western sanction regime. So we still have ahead of us to see how this will be implemented from the Russian side. But the broad formulations in the new law on education make it very unclear how and when the law will be applicable. It can be used to sanction any public statement. And the result is, of course, self-censorship from our Russian colleagues. The law induces fear. More than 300,000 Russians signed a petition against the law last spring, and there was a big debate in Russia a year ago, but the law was still passed by the Duma, and the debate was silenced. And what we have seen last year then, during 2021, is that we have seen a lot, but we have seen, perhaps most importantly, a number of the most high-profile Russian rectors, university rectors, being fired or left their position, such as Yaroslav Kuzminov at the Vyshka, rector for over 28 years, and also Sergei Zuyev at the Shaninka. So a total of 32 rectors were replaced during last year. And 18 of them actually signed letters stating that they left voluntarily by their own will. But we know from different free media outlets, of course, that several of these rectors also say that they were threatened or pressured to sign such statements. And Russian media is reporting that the security services is in fact taking control of the universities, both politically and in terms of budgets and financing. So this is the war on the Russian academic community, which is running from February 24, parallel to the war in Ukraine. And it has been going on for quite some time before that also. And after the 24th of February, we see how the academic sector, as Sirke was talking about and Oksana also emphasized, how the Russian academic sector is pressured into public support for the war, how the universities are being used as tools to ensure war support. Some of the federal universities' web pages, for example, the SAFU or the NARFU, the Federal University in Arkhangelsk, which is one of my closest cooperation institutions over 2 decades, how their web pages now contain pro-war videos, pro-war statements, rector statements, warning students not to voice criticism in social media, encouraging students to watch out for unpatriotic behavior and report on fellow students and teachers. Many universities, all of the universities in Northwest Russia, which is my sphere, have opened military training centers for students over the last years. They have opened patriotic student clubs. So there is a massive pressure within the universities. And we see also that select study programs are closed down in political sciences, in journalism in particular, study programs concerning human rights, concerning civil rights, concerning democracy development. So these are targeted. And 2 weeks back, on April 8th, I think, a meeting between the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, the Academy of Sciences, and different university leaderships conveyed very clearly how such study programs are increasingly framed or believed to be a security threat. So teaching democracy, teaching civil rights is a threat to Russian society. And at the same time, the authorities are taking measures to strengthen education in natural sciences and professions that will increase Russian economic self-sufficiency and decrease the need for import. Of course, this is an answer to the Western sanction policy. Deputy Prime Minister Vladimir Chernyshchenko said that Russia must be self-sufficient to avoid colonial dependence on foreign states. So this is a very pronounced policy from the Russian authorities now. In particular, Russia should be self-sufficient when it comes to medicines, medical equipments, and consumer goods. And Chernyshchenko also in this meeting on April 8 launched funding for what he called mega projects, which are aimed at fetching home, drawing Russian researchers who are currently abroad home again. And also these mega projects are aimed at attracting foreign researchers from so-called friendly states to Russia. My point is that this all shows the pressure that our Russian colleagues are put under. And it shows how the basic common values of academia, of our research community, academic freedom, international cooperation, joint knowledge production, how all these values are very seriously challenged by Russian authorities. We witnessed an exodus of researchers leaving Russia in late February, early March, because they feared closed borders. They feared a military state of emergency would be announced shortly. It wasn't. And many of them left very abruptly, and they actually left without leaving, going to Tbilisi, going to Yerevan, continuing their work by teaching online, which they were still allowed to. So keeping up their work, just awaiting the situation and the developments. And now many of them have returned. They have well, been forced to return because university administration is requiring them to, for the last weeks, to teach on site as a way of controlling where they are. Some colleagues that I talked to and some media outlets also report that there are rumors on substantial firings coming up during the summer holidays, that university teachers will be losing their contracts for different administrative reasons as a way of getting rid of potential opposition. But as we know, some of the best heads have already left or are leaving Russia and are taking up permanent positions in Prague, in Berlin, and also to a certain extent in Finland and in the Nordic countries. So I think one important task that we should discuss is to find ways to support and cooperate with the growing Russian academic diaspora, who will be close to us, who will be here in the years to come. And I'm very glad to say that my university in Tromso, only last week, our university board established scholarships for also Russians, and of course for Ukrainian and Belarusian researchers who need to leave Russia and who are in need of affiliation with a new academic institution and who are in need of funding. So this UIT scholarship is a supplement to the European Scholars at Risk organization. And we will hopefully be able to support also some Russian colleagues, in addition to Ukrainians and Belarusians. But I think we should discuss how to engage with this growing Russian academic diaspora, and perhaps even how this can be coordinated on a Nordic level. A few words, if I still have a few minutes, about Russian studies as a research field, and I'm afraid I'm not very optimistic. This is a very serious issue, of course, that needs to be followed up by us over the months and the years to come. One part of this is, of course, the Western sanction regime and its impact on Russian science, the cutting of institutional ties. Another aspect of this is the Kremlin's isolationist policy, which works, and these two issues work in the same direction, of course, sadly enough. So this is the paradox that we're facing. And then Russian studies as a research field. I said initially that we are stuck with digital Russian studies. The consequences are that we do not know the situation on the ground. Of course, we have access again to state administrative web pages, to the Kremlin.ru, to different state organizations. We have access to state-controlled Russian media outlets. We have the free oppositional media covering Russia, and we have social media accounts. But these are all internet-based, and the actual situation on the ground in Russia is not available to us. So we have a situation where we cannot really, where source criticism becomes essential to what we are doing. We cannot read Russian society as we used to. And I must admit that from where I stand now, it doesn't look very bright. We have to just await the situation and the development. And I think that we cannot take for given that an ending to the war in Ukraine will take us back to more predictable research cooperation with Russia. The developments in Russia are too dire for that. So I think we should prepare to work in a state of emergency or to work in at least unpredictable circumstances also in the years to come. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kari.